How's everybody doing today? A little rainy out there. No, I appreciate the time. That was a bit of a stretch saying sought after. I say that because halfway through most of my presentations, I scare the shit out of everyone when I start talking about AI. So hopefully we get over that hump and we get to the next stage of where you guys play a significant role in the future of where we're going as a species. I do preface it that way. I'm going to try to get through the deck and hopefully save some time for a few questions, because I tend to get a lot of questions after I start talking about these topics. You know, the theme of this was how AI alone won't save your company, and I truly do believe that. I also truly believe in AI. I have 33 Gen AI certifications. I literally trademarked AI Serious at the beginning of this year, because as I told my team at Walk West, and I tell others, I need you to be at least AI curious because I'm AI serious, right? The folks at MIT thought that was hilarious. And Dr. Westerman there asked me afterwards, as I presented my transformation of Walk West in the age of AI, could they sign away my name, image, and likeness to actually use the video of me transforming the company, so now current students actually see me talking about leveraging the human edge and Walk West's transformation in AI. And I say all of that just to say I'm not just another schlub that's sitting up here talking about that they know AI. I've dug deep in here into the topic, but I also understand how to pull out our domain expertise, which I would call the human edge. So with that, I'm going to get started. I start with this quote in every single presentation, conversation that I'm having with folks on the topic of AI. I am not well read, and I'm not pretending to be, but this is a quote that has really, it spoke to the heart of why I see so much of a challenge when folks are trying to adopt and adapt to this current age of AI. And it's from Upton Sinclair from 1934. By show of hands, how many people are familiar with this quote before I read it out? A few folks, right? It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. As they say, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. This isn't the first time we've struggled as a society to understand something new and game-changing. What I will say is radically different, though, this time around. It's happening within our generation today. Right? See, I'm born and raised here in Durham, North Carolina. And actually, I was reminded as I was driving in, when I started as an intern at IBM in 1998, I lived about a mile from here. An apartment complex used to be called Gorman Crossing. I don't know if it's still called that or not, down the road. My mom's side of the family were tobacco farmers. They had an entire generation to change and upskill for their kids, my parents. My dad is a retired truck driver who's literally never written an email, and he's proud of it. Oh, do I long for the day when I don't have to write emails anymore. It's problematic, though, every time he tries to get a new phone, because then I got to go with him and create a new Gmail account, and he's wondering why things won't actually transfer over. But I digress. Again, this is something of a phenomenon that's happening at every industrial revolution, right? At every turn. The reality is that when it comes to AI, the technology is ready, but the culture is not. Right? Out of those 33 Gen AI certifications I have, the overwhelming theme is that the biggest challenge right now is change management. It's us as humans. Like, we are pushing back on it. And I completely get it. And I'm very, empathetic to the realities, right? Because when you think about the Upton Sinclair quote, it's not about ignorance. It's more so about self-preservation, right? Some people call it future shock or loss aversion. It's the idea that our emotional identity, especially in the US, is so tied to our titles, our roles, the processes that we've leveraged. And it's not just about our individual compensation. When I say, it's difficult to get someone to understand, it's also our business models. A lot of the ways that we've structured our organizations, our companies, AI is quickly threatening it. It's becoming very challenging for us. I will talk about the human edge, but I need folks to understand how much kind of a different time that we're actually in. Again, you don't have a generation. At this point, the future is actually already here. AI has been around for 80 years. Machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence, has been used in programmatic media buying and how we view Facebook and everything else for the last 10 or 15 years. It became mainstream in November, 3 years ago this month, when ChatGPT dropped. How many people, by show of hands, use ChatGPT? I can't even find somebody that has a hand down. All right. ChatGPT is the consumer brand, 800 million weekly active users, 800 million and growing, right? So everyone is using AI in some capacity, but we need to understand and use it more. We need to understand the impact that it has, and I'll unpack that a little bit as we talk about this. And then we need to leverage the human edge, your domain expertise, because we all have domain expertise that AI cannot replace. But here's the problem, and I see this every single day. People are treating AI like it's just another tech upgrade. I hear all the time, AI is just like this, or AI is just like that. AI is just like nothing we've ever seen. My degree is in computer science. I've written code in 6 different languages. I understand deeply how a lot of these things work. This is a fundamental shift, and we have to start addressing it that way. I get and I understand why people stay connected to a past, right? It's because we don't really understand, and it's very unclear what our role is in the future, right? It's human nature, right? But again, you don't have 10 years, you don't have 20 years. You have to start learning about this thing. I go on a lot of different stages, talking to different groups. I was speaking 2 days ago to 200 marketers, and they always ask me, for the American Marketing Association, CEO Benny Johnson asked me all the time, he said, what is the one word, Greg, you want to tell your audience that they need to do right now? I said, learn. I said, you have to learn. Not enough people are actually understanding how these things work, so you don't really understand where your value is and your superpower, right? And we'll talk about different ways and different things, but I do want to make sure that people understand this is radically different. I tell people all the time, you keep telling me this, just that. I just don't have time for that anymore. We don't have time for it anymore. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm simply saying, if you lean into this thing, I always tell people, I was like, here's the challenge. If you lean into AI, you'll likely make more money. If you don't lean into AI, you likely won't have a job. I don't really understand the choice, right? I have a podcast called AI Voice of Victim, and my chairman at the beginning of the year, he said, Greg, why would you call it that? I said, because by the end of this year, people are going to start to feel like victims. They're going to feel like nobody told them. I can't have that on my conscience. Like, I've been out here trying to explain to folks, right? The tsunami hit in November of 22. I get the people that run for the hills. I get the weirdos like me that want to try to ride the wave. What I don't understand is the people that are just standing on the beach looking up at this giant wave waiting for it to crush them. So much of our society is kind of stuck in that middle right now, and we need to start to move faster. There's some hope, right? It's not a hang glider. It's a space shuttle. I got my little prop here for you guys. I need you to understand how radically different this thing is. It is not this thing. This is not the thing that you're going to learn on a Saturday. You're going to say to your friends, oh, that'll be cool. I'll do this a few times a year. Just go run off that cliff and jump. You'll get the hang of it. Word. This is a space shuttle, and it is in desperate need of mission control, and that is what PR is. I got my own PR expert sitting over there. I'm not going to embarrass her right now. She keeps me in line. Tries to, at least. I can be very disruptive, so you give me a microphone for an hour, there's no telling what I'll say up here. I might need some PR after this. But with you guys, the role that you play, your domain expertise, right? You have the ability to translate the complexity, right? Guide behavior, communicate risk, manage a narrative. These are all things that are part of mission control to keep us in line, to keep us going and moving forward. All of this nets down on the most fundamental challenge that we have as a society and just the business community in general is trust. You guys create and give us that narrative so that we can create trust. That is what mission control gives to those pilots. There's a little guy in there right now. I imagine that's me. But I need those folks. We all need these folks that can actually manage and bring some calm to the chaos. Because right now, trust is the most important thing that we have. It's the thing that is missing. We spent decades building digital infrastructure, from clouds to APIs, algorithms, automation, data centers, all the things, right? But none of it works without trust. Trust is the new infrastructure. It's the invisible system that sits under everything. The marketing, the messaging, the brand. It's all about trust right now. In a world of endless content that can be created at the push of a button, I tell people all the time, the difference between you and me is I can be on camera, on stage, on point all the time. We're going to get to a point where you don't trust the things you see. You're probably already at that point. Who's played around with Sora 2 or seen VO3? The number of people that send me stuff, and I say, that ain't real. That chiropractor did not throw that grandma out the window. I'm trying to explain this to you. I know it looks real, right? And that is going to be very challenging for us all. People don't trust what they read. They don't trust what they see. They don't trust what shows up in their feeds, right? We've built the most advanced networking and information system in history, but at the same time, we've simultaneously engineered a collapse in belief. Again, this is where you guys play in. I was telling my PR person, Kia, can I say your name? I'm sorry. I already said it. I said, Kia, let me just get this straight. You want me to communicate in a room of 100 communication professionals? Okay. I said, I will not have a survey at the end of this one, right? You guys are going to be judging me, like you should have said this and that, right? You guys are the leaders of this trust infrastructure, right? You can engineer credibility. You can become the human stabilizers in a machine-driven system, right? I am going to wear out this space shuttle analogy because I need you to understand where you play, because it's not a hang glider. It's not self-controlled, right? It's beyond anything that we can comprehend. One of our biggest challenges right now, and I talk to business leaders, you know, I talk a lot about things around growing companies. I'm going to get there too, because you guys play a pivotal role. I mean, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. PRSA, my own company. We're growing 30, 40% year over year, not because of AI, because of PR, because of good marketing, good storytelling, good human-to-human interaction, events, all the things that you guys can support. That's the thing that people are missing, because they're still trying to game a system that they can no longer game. And it's very challenging, and I'll unpack that in a minute. We're in this trust deficit. A lot of folks, again, I talk to folks all the time about, you know, I say in May of 2024, Google turned the lights off on a lot of small organizations. And I talked to a lot of executives late last year, and they didn't understand what I was talking about. I said, well, they started to roll out AI overviews, right, in May of 24. This didn't just happen. And I said, I interviewed almost 70 executives. And I asked them the same fundamental question. I said, how often, if ever, do you scroll past the AI overview or click through? 98% of them said never. I said, okay, well, you agree with me then. AI is picking the winners. They said, what are you talking about? I said, what do you mean what I'm talking about? If nobody clicks through, then we're just going to accept whatever AI brings back. He's like, oh, I didn't say that. I'm like, you did say that. You don't want to acknowledge that you're saying that, and I'm okay with that, because I understand as humans, we search for answers, not links. Right? It was never a great idea to just get 10 blue links and go dig around for the next 3 days to realize that someone lied to you about how great they were at something. Right? It was always going to be natural for us to jump or make this leap to getting the direct answer. But as a part of that, also, you're going to have to trust the system. And again, we're in a trust deficit that you guys are going to help save our companies with. I want to talk about the lead flow crisis, because I talk about this quite a bit, because a lot of people don't understand. I see a lot of people saying, look at all these cool things I can do with AI, but they don't really understand the impact that AI has on them and their businesses in particular. We're at a point now where almost 70% of all Google searches end without a click. That means most organizations that don't have a major brand are invisible. I talked to a lot of marketers that have lost their jobs. By show of hands, how many people have friends or marketers that have lost their jobs in the last year? Yeah. A lot of people don't. I get the fundamental question: how do we measure attribution? How do we do this and that? I'm like, that's a tricky topic right now. When we talk about AI search for a minute, how many people here use Claude? How many people use Gemini? Okay. And Microsoft Copilot? I ask these questions because, as you can see, there's a lot of different systems out here. So in November of 2024, I registered a domain, what is AEO, or Answer Engine Optimization? Has anyone heard the term AEO or GEO? Right? I started to go down that rabbit hole last November till I realized I was like, uh-oh, there's too many different models who look at authority differently. This is not the same kind of challenge from a Google perspective. We have to figure out a different path. I told the team at the beginning of this year, we're going to have to do 3 things really well. We're going to have to make sure we're seen, heard, and cited, CITED, by humans and machines alike for maximum results. They all looked at me like I had 2 heads. They're like, what are you talking about, cited and machines? I say, I don't think you understand what's actually happening. Traditional Google search used to be 4 keywords. And AI search or research is 30 to 50 words, and it's a conversation. That is a fundamental shift. Traditionally, Google, you could expect for every 6 times it scraped or pulled information from your site that you would get 1 visit. Then it was 18. I don't even know what the count is now. If you're using ChatGPT for search, it scrapes your site 1,500 times for every 1 visit you get. Was 18? No, 1,500. If you're using Claude, it scrapes your site 60,000 times for every 1 visit you get. People weren't paying attention to what was actually happening to their business. This is what I call the lead flow crisis and the challenge, and where PR will come into play here in a second. When it comes to email, everybody was like, man, this is great. We can leverage AI to push all these emails out. Great, but if everyone does it, then it becomes a problem. Your email inboxes are saturated. I tell my team all the time, I say, you'll never convert me with cold email. There's only 2 forms of cold email, scam and spam. These things lead into the lead flow crisis, and I say these things to educate people because you have to think differently, and you have to leverage folks like the ones in this room right now to help break through that. So then everybody said, well, we'll just go do paid media. I said, okay, paid media is an auction house. If everyone goes to paid media, then the cost goes through the roof. I call it economic hospice for most companies. The math ain't mathing. You have to figure out a different path. I say these things because I'm highly concerned that people not paying attention, it is going to crush the middle market and small business community. And without that, we have no economy. Everybody scared yet? People always ask me, they say, well, I don't have time to learn AI. I said, of course you don't have time to learn AI because of the productivity crisis. As knowledge workers, we spend 50 to 60% of our work weeks searching for things to do our job, copying and pasting, and reformatting data. 50 to 60% of our work week. In sales organizations, they spend 70% of their time doing administrative tasks, meaning they only spend 30% of their time actually talking to customers. We pushed all of our folks to this model of, oh man, I can't wait to go fill out this CRM about all the deals I lost last week. How about you actually go talk to some people and bring some business in? How many have been tracking the Walmart CEO the last 6 weeks? Anyone know what he's been saying? The Walmart CEO said at the end of September that Walmart is on a 3-year hiring freeze. Not 3 months, not 3 quarters, 3 years. He followed up with that and said that if there is a job that AI does not impact, I have yet to find it. He didn't say he was laying off anyone. He said, they're not hiring for 3 years. I said, when Fortune 1, they're Fortune 1. When Fortune 1 says this, I think people have to start listening and start understanding and learning what's happening right now. There are two different games being played. There are the folks that are leveraging these tools. Everyone at Walk West has at least one Gen AI certification, right? Our quality of work, our quality of life has significantly changed, except for 3 days ago when Cloudflare went down and ChatGPT and all that anyone experienced that, like the panic that I experienced from that morning? What people don't understand is that it wasn't just ChatGPT. So Cloudflare went down, the same company that I got all that data about the scraping. Most websites sit on top of that. It went down, so ChatGPT went down. All the apps that sit on top of ChatGPT went down that I use. And I was like, uh-oh, there's a problem. The beginning of this year, I was talking to a lot of folks, and I do a lot of AI training for folks and trying to help them automate and do things. I don't use AI for everything, right? There's some basic process things that we have to do better at as a society in general. But people kept saying, well, I'm not going to use AI. And I was like, okay, interesting. I said, you do understand that by the end of 2025, every piece of technology that comes out will have AI in it. I have a banking client that had this long legal lease late last year saying, we're not using it, you can't use it, this, and that. I said, cool. We talked a few days ago. They said, yeah, our tech vendors have pushed us into a space where we have to now address this. I was like, I tried to warn you what was happening. Learning to talk to the machine, prompt engineering, I don't like to call it prompt engineering. How you communicate the machine is an art and it's a special skill that you need to have. You're basically communicating. You guys are communicators. I call it the new form of typing. I learned to type on a typewriter in high school in 1994 at Northern Durham High School. I was able to blaze through any technology from that point on. It was the main interface. Learning to talk to the machine will be the main interface for all technology you use. See, I didn't make these rules. People ask me all the time, do you think you can stop or slow down AI? I said, well, you probably have a better chance reaching into the sky and turning off the sun. But if you can do that, then sure. I'm saying these things because the people that are using these tools, if you go to Silicon Valley, if you go to different cities that are just all in, people always say jokingly that you can tell the vibe of a city based on its billboards. I'm not even going to get into what our billboards say about us. But if you go into San Francisco and these other areas, it's AI. And these people are blazing through things. And I say these things not because they say that they're better. It's not that they're better. What I'm trying to get across to folks is we will be quickly in a spot where we can't compete. If someone can move 10 times faster, can build things with a smaller team, how can you actually compete with that? Almost everyone in this room raised their hand when I was talking about AI, which means that the market sophistication is to a point where you have to do this because it's going to be the expectation. My expectation when my AC goes down is that the person that comes in, if they can't figure it out quickly, is going to look on ChatGPT or Gemini or something and try to figure it out. Not that they're going to go call their manager and we can come in between the hours of 12 and 8 p.m. on Saturday. No, go figure it out, or I will. So what do we do? I've scared everyone, right? The reality though, if you start to learn AI, you can actually get 80% of that time back to be more strategic. People will argue with me all the time. It's like, well, it's not humane to use AI. It's like, how is it humane to spend 60% of your time staring at a screen trying to figure out how to talk to your employee, for 2 hours a week? The other day, we were at Walk West. Because we use these tools, we got to do a show and share at the end of the day for an hour. No one was stressed because they were able to blaze through and quickly show what they came up with and how we can help our clients. And it was a fun activity. But it was because they've embraced the technology, because I've given them a safe space, because a lot of folks also don't have a safe space to do it. And we'll get into how we start to adopt it more and faster. Anybody a partner or use HubSpot or familiar with HubSpot by chance? So HubSpot came up, they were the creators of the inbound and the funnel and the linear funnel. So in September, I became a HubSpot partner earlier this year. And when I kept telling people about the lead flow crisis, they kept looking at me again like I had two heads, and they was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Search isn't, there's no problem, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. Until in February this year, HubSpot goes viral because their blog traffic dropped 80% year over year. Not 8, not 18, 80%. The people who invented the inbound and all of these things, their own blog traffic dropped 80%. But what they did was they protected themselves because they were using other tactics. They were using PR. They were using, they had their own newsletter. They acquired a company in 2021 called The Hustle. So they had their own podcasts, their own Substack, their own newsletters, right? All of these other things that aren't specific to AI, they realized when people zig, we have to zag. So I followed in that kind of wake. And in September, they had to break the hearts of a lot of their partners because they had to say that the funnel was dead. So HubSpot is based in Boston. Inbound's always been in Boston. Then they moved it to San Francisco. That was a tell that people weren't paying attention to. When they came out there, all the partners, they said, hey, the traditional funnel is dead. We have a loop marketing playbook, AI everywhere inside of it. And the gasp in the room from all these partners, I was like, oh no, they weren't ready for this. So I tell people at HubSpot all the time, I said, you got 8,000 partners, of which 7,950 can't spell AI. So it seems like a problem. They're like, yeah. Because they realized they had to change their whole business model if they wanted to survive. People told me that Google will never get away with, move away from their ad model. I said, these people had a Netflix meets Blockbuster moment. When Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, comes back at the beginning of the year, that was a tell. They were, there was a threat called ChatGPT. So all these people have to have changed their business model. And what I'm saying to you all is there's a new path, there's a different path, and you guys play a significant role in it. You'll start to hear more people hopefully stop talking about funnels and MQLs, because I try to advise marketers all the time. I say, if you keep walking into that CEO's office talking about your traffic, I was like, what story are you going to tell them? Everybody's traffic just fell off a cliff. You can't defend that. You have to come up with a different playbook. When HubSpot in September dropped their playbook, I was like, perfect. We already had our 4P framework. It was podcast, partnerships, PR, and publishing. At the beginning of the year, I said, you have to understand the things that you can control. And there's only really two things that you can control right now: personality-led growth and community-led growth. Podcasting was the perfect medium for us from a personality perspective, from a video, audio, how we can be heard, be out there in the market, amplify our voices. The partnerships is all about borrowing trust. Kia says to me that partnerships is my favorite P. I said, I love all my Ps. Just like I love all my children. But I do I gravitate towards the partnership. You have to figure out ways to borrow trust. The PR, be cited. What people didn't understand about AI search and how these large language models work, they're looking for other places that say you're the shit, not just what you said on your own blog. It doesn't work that way. I was trying to get across to my team, if I show up everywhere and someone else is saying we're doing a great job, then we're more likely than not to surface. People are still trying to game their own website, and I'm like, cool, man, good luck with that. I'm trying to help, and I'm also trying to show you all, you're needed more so than ever. Seen, heard, cited. But it was still hard for folks to understand what we were talking about at Walk West and what we were doing in this, this weird guy that's been trapped in this AI mental bubble for the last several years. Until HubSpot, which is a marketing juggernaut, came out with their loop marketing playbook that had 4 stages that we just layered. We didn't do a lot of marketing and branding in this. I said, we're going to layer our 4 Ps on their loop marketing playbook. We're going to call it the 4 loop. Now people are like, oh man, that's brilliant what you're doing now. Well, we've been doing this, but I had to borrow some trust, right? I had to have the right partnership. Because people ask me, they're like, why are you such a big fan of HubSpot? I said, I'm not. I needed credibility through a different partner channel. What I'm trying to teach folks is there's a different path and you have to do things differently. If you keep living in the old world, it goes back to the Upton Sinclair quote. I'd say this all the time to folks. It's like, you don't have to worry about AI replacing you if you go out of business. Y'all all going to be replaced. I'm trying to keep people gainfully employed. I am trying to help businesses grow. But you can't keep trying to do the same thing that worked 2 years ago. And I get that was a very near distant past, but it doesn't work anymore that way. The podcast, this is an infinite loop, right? The podcast will influence the partnerships, that influences the PR strategy, that influences our publishing, and you keep running it, and it compounds, and you actually can create a growth flywheel, as some folks will say. I'm gonna try to speed through a little bit because I can already tell I'm gonna get a lot of questions after this. So I wanna be able to answer some. But again, you guys are mission control. What I needed to build when Kia joined us earlier this year and we started to build our team together, I needed to build a trust system. What I realized is that people didn't trust things anymore, right? What I realized is that we had to get out there and do things differently. We couldn't just game the algorithms. I needed Kia to tell me what I should be saying, and probably better yet, what I should not be saying, right? They even tell me to stop wearing all black, so I got this very bright pink shirt so I can be seen. Again, PR saved my company, not AI. We leverage the human edge, right? AI is amazing at generating content, but it's our amazing humans that give it context. I've said to you all, I'm very serious about AI. I trademarked AI serious, right? But we need a lot more. One of the analogies I always use, I was actually talking to Jarvis, who's our amazing camera and videographer over there. We were talking about VO3. And I said, look, your domain expertise is what matters the most. I said, here's my analogy I always tell folks. If you give me 4 ingredients to make a meal, it will be okay. You give those same 4 ingredients to Bobby Flay, it will be amazing. People have to understand how to leverage their domain expertise. I am not in PR. I do not know what to do with these tools to make me a better communicator. I partner with Kia, who can use these tools and her voice to make me a better communicator. I view the world through the lens of not human versus machine, but human plus machine. Right? I did a presentation a few weeks back in Charlotte, at UNC Charlotte, called AI with a Soul, and I keep trying to explain to folks, as much as I'm invested in AI, it is our domain expertise, it is that human edge that makes the difference. You guys, you see, it's the co-pilots of conscience. We need you all, but I also need you guys to learn and understand these things. As adults, we don't adopt things we don't understand. We more or less reject it, right? And so, as you can see, I'm a consultant, and I use a lot of alliteration. So I have my 4 Ps, now my 4 Es. I got my 5 Cs, if you want to hear those later. But everything starts with education. I was talking to the North Carolina Department of IT, some of the leaders there, and I said, we have to figure out how we expand AI literacy. I talked to Wake Tech the other day. I said, I'm willing to do nights and weekends and just do free training. I said, people have to become more literate about how these tools actually work. There's so many misconceptions, and I was like, we have to do a better job. It is the new form of typing. But it starts with education. Again, I have 33 Gen AI certifications. This stuff is moving at such a radical pace. I'm always trying to figure out what's next, what I can do differently. But the bigger point I was trying to do as a CEO was to say to my team, hey, I'm invested in this. I don't need you to have 30 certifications. I just need you to have 1 or 2 and understand the basics of how these tools work, right? I was trying to lead by example. You guys can help communicate and lead through this learning curve that's out there. Because again, a lot of it is a lack of trust. If the great writers and communicators can lean into this technology, some folks on our PR team have written, books and all these other things. If they can lean into these things, and it's not that they're replacing them, it's about how they leverage and amplify these things, and then start to experiment, play around with these things. Then move into the execution. We always say when I'm training folks, or even when we do it internally, I said you have to do 3 things if you want people to adopt AI. You have to make it personal, you have to make it fun, you have to make it safe. We did a 90-day challenge, and I stayed out of it. I was on a team, but I wasn't looking over anyone's shoulder. I wasn't even involved in it. We let people post online, certified the Walk West way. We had a leaderboard. I think we have 5 or 6 teams. I think the team that won they also had the best name. Bot Girl Summer, was that the team? Bot Girl Summer won, Kia's team won. But it became fun. It started to create their own unlocks, their own aha moments. I use AI for a lot of things to try to unlock. I use Suno to make music. Anyone ever use Suno to make any music? She said, I didn't even know you were here. What's up? I was talking to Wade Tech. They said, yeah, Tisa came and did something for us. They're going to do something again. See, there you go. AI literacy, we need it. But the last thing I tell, and I usually call out executives on this, is like you have to make sure it's also economic impact, right? But that comes last. The reason why I call executives out and I say, look, here's the problem, and this is why they need PR and better communication. When you talk about your business goals with AI and don't talk about your employees, all they hear is AI is going to replace me. I say, you're talking about all these great business goals, cool, cool, cool. AI affects every human on the planet, which means it affects every employee in your organization. So when you don't say what their role is, all they hear is AI is going to replace me. So now you have 90% of your organization rowing against you, and you seem to be surprised of why you can't get people to adopt it. You have not communicated this effectively. You have not created a personal, fun, and safe space for them to understand how to leverage these tools. Because once they see their own unlock, their own aha moments, then you can start talking about your business goals. Then you got the belief, you got the trust of your own people, and now they're going to roll with you. People can say whatever you want to say about Walmart. They crushed their earnings recently. But what he did say is that they were going to upskill every single employee inside of Walmart, from the cashiers to corporate. And he said, because I want them to have a fighting chance on the other side of this thing, is what their CEO said. Then he used AI to replace himself because he's retiring in January. Real quick on personality-led growth. I only have a few more slides here, and I'll try to take a few questions if I have time, if they don't kick me off. If y'all don't boo enough, just don't boo. All right. Again, I'm out here doing this because of personality-led growth, right? In 2024, there was some Forbes data about personality-led growth. And it said 49% of your brand's reputation, your company's brand, is directly tied to your CEO or executive's reputation. And the smaller you are, the bigger that percentage is. I told the audience the other day, I said I could change the name of Walk West to Hooper Snake tomorrow and it wouldn't matter. Until you become Nike, because we all like to pretend like we're Nike. We ain't. You don't have that level of brand equity unless, I'm sorry if anybody works with Nike, I love some free shoes, size 14. Like I skipped that point too on the AI search point, which is around this concept of a filter bubble. Because I'm sure there'll still be people in there that's like, oh, I don't know, man, SEO is still the same. And I'm like, all right. The concept of filter bubble, real quick, and I'll get back to this, is the idea that, and I tell people all the time, I said, I talk to ChatGPT about Nikes and Air Jordans every day. I said, good luck with Adidas or Under Armour ever showing up in my search. It does not work that way. I said, if it ever surfaced that in because it has memory, if it ever surfaced that, we're going to break up. I'm going to move over to Gemini or Claude or somebody else. There's so much that people don't understand about how these tools actually work, and they keep trying to hold on to a world that doesn't exist anymore. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to scare people, but if you don't understand the rules of the game, how are you going to play? Personality-led growth is an amazing thing for everyone in this audience, for everyone in your company. You got to start to elevate your executives. This is really about community-led growth. It's hard for me to deny that partnerships is not my favorite P key, I'm sorry, because I do gravitate towards, but I do think that you have to borrow trust. I partner with folks, and I'm going to give a call to action here in a second, but what I try to tell people in the age of AI, growth has to be both earned and engineered. You guys can help us earn it. I'm sure there's a bunch of smart people in your organizations or around you that can help engineer it. But the most important thing is trust in earning the growth. People are going to gravitate to the things that they know, that they trust, that, that has, a lot of people say we're in this Renaissance age, right? And it's going to be more about generalists. And as you start to use these tools, as I was teaching some HR professionals a few weeks back, I guess it was a month ago now, and they would say things as they were starting to learn more about these tools. They were like, but that's what L&D does, or that's what this group does. I was like, yeah, it's going to be problematic because you can do so much more now once you start getting in there. We were able to credibly showcase in real time someone that was in the class doing their HR homework, 3 months of work in 2 hours. 3 months in 2 hours. There's 2 different games being played out there in the market right now. And it's only going to speed up. Here's my call to action to you guys. Over the next 90 days, how many of you, just show of hands, actually have a podcast or can get their people on a podcast? You should at least be able to get your folks on a podcast, right? Whether you want to call this a figure eight, a racetrack, a loop, flywheel, I don't care about how you design it. But what folks need to understand is how can you actually manage personality-led growth and community-led growth? So what I would say to you is over the next 90 days, start with like a 3-episode story arc for a podcast, something that's a real tension for your audience, your clients, even if it's an internal for your employees. Partnerships, go find an ally. It doesn't have to be a competitive threat. I actually don't care if it's a competitive threat. I actually like that. But someone that may be adjacent to you that can elevate. You give them some value, they give you some value. I said at the beginning of this year, I did my 2025 ins and outs, and the first thing I said is I'm going to support more women leaders publicly, and the second thing I said is I'm not going to go about business alone. Partnership is the new growth skill, if not survival skill. I said that in January of this year. You see a lot of the larger companies, they've been doing it. Figure out who you can partner with. From a PR perspective, secure some earned placements. Get your folks cited, get yourself cited, get your bylines going. You got to show up so many more places. And then the last piece is publishing. You have to produce some durable, searchable, repurposeful assets, white papers, books, you name it. Those things start to compound. What I tell people when we go back to the economics of what you need to do in the age of AI to grow a company, I said from an engineering perspective, you need to have 4 to 6 new roles across 8 to 10 new tools or capabilities to deliver 10 to 100x more content twice as fast across 5 new channels. Most companies aren't built for that. You have to figure out how to use these tools because the companies that can do that and flood the zone, they are leveraging AI in a significant way. They are going to outrun you. But you guys use your superpower. Get your people out there. People buy from other people. Right? But if I don't know that you exist, then that's a problem. It's a challenge. I don't know. I need to go buy from another human. I don't know how I get to that human. You guys can figure that out. But that's who I'm buying from. And then I say, measure what matters. I tell people all the time, I say, I just don't use click-through rates or traffic or MQLs. You're going to get fired because you don't have a defensible story. It's not you. Everyone's traffic is falling off a cliff. Like it is what it is. I said, so measure what matters. Completions, saves, shares, citations. We call those attention qualified leads. I said, you need to measure your AQLs, not your MQLs. Or my chairman would say, you need to measure your booked meetings, Greg. How many actual meetings you have? Not qualified leads. How many meetings do you have? And remember the analogy, right? If you treat AI like a hang glider, you'll glide and you'll end up on the floor over there. If you treat it like a space shuttle, you'll scale to new heights. Your superpower, again, is mission control. I want you to understand that AI doesn't replace PR. It actually requires it. Because trust doesn't scale by code, it scales by consistency. And when people understand your purpose, they don't just follow you, they believe you. So everybody in here today, again, I'm going to beat this analogy. You're not passengers on the shuttle. You are the navigators, the narrators, the guardians of belief. If you lead the people first, AI will follow. I'm AI serious. Let's get to work. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, thank you. My name is Tianduo Zhang from North Carolina Central University. So in the early days of AI, it almost feels like the doomsday for writers. But looking at the 4P that you presented, 2 of them are very heavily rely on text or writing based. So is it really the doom or the renaissance of writers?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the the thing. It's where you're placing the writing, right? A lot of folks, I go back to the email inbox saturation piece. Everybody thought they can write great copy, right? They can write great emails, but if everybody's doing that, and then people say, oh, it's a sea of sameness, right? It is a sea of sameness if everybody gravitates to the same exact channel. Right now, it's trying to figure out the new channels. That's why I said at the end, the hyperbole, 4 or 5 new channels. People need to have their own Substack. They need to be able to place things on Reddit, on Quora, all these other places that we've historically not been. It's not a doomsday for writers, it's a doomsday for those historical channels. They're all being flooded with the same nonsense, right? And so what I try to get across to folks, use your domain expertise, but you have to pair it with this new paradigm of where to be. I think that's the problem that a lot of folks are challenged with right now. Questions?
So some of us in this room have also worked in technology, sciences. How did you make that transition mentally, spiritually, from tech to being a PR communication advocate?
I had to break my mental model to that point. I tell people this all the time. I say, if you can't break your mental model, it's going to be impossible, right? So one of the things I did, even late last year, was I forced myself to envision a world where Google did not exist. And I kept asking, this is the irony, I kept asking Google's Gemini, if Google was to go away, and using its deep research, they had an experimental deep research for paid pro users last year. And I said, if Google went away, what would people do to grow their marketing in 2025? And the same things kept coming back. It kept saying podcasts. I don't know if you know this, but SiriusXM said that podcasts have a 23x trustworthiness rating relative to other channels. Regardless if the information is true, people like to hear from another human, right? So it said podcasts. It said short form video. It said micro-influencers, right? It said personality-led growth. It said partnerships. I was like, oh. So all I did was throw alliteration on top of that and say, I'm going to do that. And I kept testing and testing. And I asked Claude, and I asked ChatGPT, I asked Perplexity. They all came back with the same thing. If Google didn't exist, this is what people should do. I didn't just make it up. I just kept asking the question. But I had to break my own mental model and say, because I also knew as a business leader, what we had been doing wasn't working, and everyone that I talked to said their business was going down. I sit on the board of multiple tech companies. The irony of that is I advised most of them to do what we're doing. We're growing 40%, and they're going down 40% because they kept doing it the old way. I was like, you pay me to advise you, and you won't listen, so I don't know what to do. Question?
We have time for one more question. Oh, girl, I'm running.
Oh, no, you can't. No.
I'm running. Okay, last one.
Oh, I thought you were going to go to Chase. Okay.
Okay, last one. I love how you talked about making, kind of that entry point into AI personal, fun, and safe.
Yeah.
What might you recommend as far as kind of internal policies on AI use within organizations and trying to establish that to get an entry point going within an organization?
That's a great question. That's been a question been top of mind. Back in February, I posed that question to Dr. Michael Jabor, that is like the associate head of AI for Microsoft. I said, and I posed the question because I was in some room and a couple of my attorneys were across the room. I said, what do you do when your whole governance model is from legal, which says don't, right? And we talked it through, and a lot of people have moved off that position, again, because it's not about ChatGPT. Every technology has it embedded, so you don't really have a choice. But the thing I first say is, one, you need to roll back to your own data policy. What people are really asking is, what is my data policy? Because what they're scared of is that it's just my data's going to get out in the wild. I said, well, you should revert back to your data policy, to which a company told me they didn't have one. I said, well, that's a problem, right? But the other thing I say to folks all the time is that there's a concept of shadow AI, right? If you don't create a policy and don't allow folks, over 78% of people are already using AI inside of your organization, whether you want them to or not. It's like when mobile first came out and people said, don't bring your phone to work. I said, good luck taking this out of my pocket, right? But what I would say to folks is, one, use the enterprise licenses where they already have an agreement not to train on your data. So if you're a Google Workspace company, then use Google Gemini. If you're Microsoft, then use Copilot. ChatGPT has an enterprise license. The first thing you need to do is get the enterprise license and the indemnification, right? But the second thing, when I said make it personal, fun, and safe, I also take the approach, I didn't care what certification they got, and I didn't care what tool they used, right? We gave them some baseline primer as to what they shouldn't. Don't put your personal information in there, just like you wouldn't email it to someone. Don't put it in there, right? But then I let them choose their own tools, and I shortened the window to 90 days, and we also gave everybody a Coursera license, or we paid for one for 90 days, right? Because what I wanted them to do is have their own aha moments, and then it started to move. And then once they saw the tools that they use every day start to have AI, so the creators were like, no, until Figma said, we're all in on AI, and they're like, well, I'm into it now too, right? That's where you start to have these aha moments. And then you have a baseline of what are the general tools that we use. Again, but go to the enterprise ones if you want, the protection.
Well, let's give Greg one more round of applause. Thank you so, so much for a wonderful morning session.